So you're saying not only how are you affected, but because of the collusion, how many other families out there are sitting there with autistic kids because this information was never represented properly or truthfully?
The CDC knew about these relationships as early as November 7th, 2001, because I have a memo that says November 7th, 2001, and it delineates these relationships, and it shows a positive relationship with the MMR and autism among African Americans. It showed an association with what the CDC termed isolated autism. That's kids like my son that got autism but didn't have any other types of comorbidities like cerebral palsy or mental retardation that just basically regressed into autism. There were strong, statistically significant relationships. CDC knew about it November 7th, 2001, and you look at how many kids have been born since then, how many kids have been diagnosed with autism since then, and how many kids actually got the MMR on time, and how many lives, how many families could have been saved.
In your wildest dreams, do you think you would ever gotten to the point where you're on the phone surreptitiously with a CDC scientist who's on the autism study with MMR, calling you and talking to you and basically saying, reanalyze this data, please? And saying there's collusion between the scientists, that there's fraud in the way that they're representing the data, that you are a family that's affected. You know, in 2001, you already reviewed that they were hiding things. I think you said November 7, 2001, that there was email traffic that you got through FOIA. All these years, all these kids getting vaccinated. Now, one of the things that I happen to know, because I've had conversations with you personally, and I've watched vaccines, et cetera, but one of the things is that what they showed in this study was that if you delayed the use of the MMR vaccine, the risk of autism goes down precipitously, correct?
That is correct.
I mean, it was an obvious thing, and they didn't even want to report that. I mean, they could have just said, hey, we have new data, delay this, but it would then admit that the people who followed the schedule in the beginning have autistic kids as a result of their recommendations, so they couldn't admit it.
The CDC would never go on record and admit that, so they chose to cover it up. And what they did was they sat on that information for a year and a half. They would meet weekly. These 5 scientists would meet on a weekly basis. They would have Thompson rerun the data. On record and admit that, so they chose to cover it up. And what they did was they sat on that information for a year and a half. They would meet weekly. These 5 scientists would meet on a weekly basis. They would have Thompson rerun the data, reanalyze the data. He could not make the effect go away. Okay.
Even trying to make the effect go away by reanalyzing the data or using different statistical manipulation, he still couldn't make it go away.
He couldn't make that information go away. And so what they decided to do, specifically with the African Americans, was they said, oh, we will only rely on race data for those individuals that have a valid state of Georgia birth certificate. So it took that population and it reduced it by almost a half. It became half as large, and everybody that knows statistics knows that if you have a smaller sampling size, you lose statistical power, you lose the relationship. And so they used that. There was no good reason to say that, oh, we got race data from birth certificates, because the race data was in all the school records for all the children that were participating in that study. The only reason they did that was to reduce the statistical power. The scientists that were Thompson's superiors said, run it this way and see what happens. And lo and behold, when they eliminated those kids, the relationship went away.
And there could be no logic, right? I mean, they're saying, oh, I know one way we can reduce the sample size is if they don't have a Georgia birth certificate, as if that changes them genetically somehow, as if that changes their species. Why should it matter what birth certificate they have to the study and the population in the study? Is there any rationale?
There is no effective rationale for that. There is no scientific reason for that. It is clear cut that what they wanted to do was reduce the statistical power so they could make that relationship go away. And when they were able to do that, Dr. Colleen Boyle and Dr. Frank DiStefano called a meeting, said, bring in all of your information regarding the effect with African Americans, and we're going to throw it away. We are going to destroy that information. I don't have the exact day that they met, but it was between September and October 2002. So they've been sitting on that data for about 8 months. And they decided that they would trash can that data. And if you look at the information that the CDC had after the trash can meeting, those results were nowhere to be found. They buried